Coaching is not about helping someone become a different person, but about helping them return to who they originally were before being alienated by expected roles and fears. This statement opens up the spirit of developing leaders, bequing evidence asterisk, a book that doesn't speak of power, but of the human process of learning self-mastery amidst the invisible layers of pressure in the leadership world. This work doesn't preach or offer success formulas, but carefully unveils each layer of psychology, society, and knowledge hidden behind the journey of human development. It doesn't just ask how to lead better, but poses a much harder question. What does it mean to be a human being sufficiently self-aware to lead? For over 2 decades, executive coaching has become the most honest mirror reflecting contemporary leadership capabilities, no longer just rigid lessons on management. Coaching is a space where leaders temporarily remove their masks. There, they don't discuss targets but emotions, not strategy but their own limitations. This book compiles the experiences, data, and reflections from hundreds of such dialogues to show that leadership development begins not with knowledge, but with awareness. Behind every person in power is a silent struggle between control and understanding, between efficiency and meaning, between action and stillness. Developing leaders, basic coaching, doesn't side with any of these paradoxes. It invites the reader to step into the middle, where all definitions become fragile, and where people begin to learn to lead not only others, but also their own minds. And perhaps the real question the book wants to leave us with isn't how to become a better leader, but rather, once all titles, reputations, and results have been stripped away, is there anything left within that person powerful enough to lead not the world, but themselves? Long before managers began discussing performance or leadership, in a small Hungarian village called Cox, a robust, covered carriage was built to transport passengers over rough roads without them being thrown from their seats. The English called it a coach. This vehicle was born to take people where they wanted to go. Centuries later, the same word was reborn at Offenbach, where teachers were called coaches because they helped students pass their exams. This simple notion that someone accompanies you, quietly helping you go further than you could on your own, became the root of what the modern world calls coaching. The origin of coaching doesn't come from business, but from the desire for human development. When Gobi wrote the first article about coaching in business in 1937, he was only talking about training sales teams. But a few decades later, this idea expanded. Lewis Mess and Moe began introducing coaching into management. Then, Tim Galwey, in his 1974 book The Inner Game of Tennis **, made the world realize that people don't lose due to technique, but due to the voice in their heads. And since then, coaching has no longer been about instruction, but about unlocking potential. In the 1980s in the US, Thomas Leonard, a financial planner, realized that deep conversations with his clients had the power to change them. He founded Coach U and then established the International Coach Federation, ICF, in 1995, making coaching a profession, an industry of transformation. During the same period, society was changing rapidly. Old power structures collapsed, and hierarchical systems gave way to individual freedom and self-responsibility. People could climb very high but also get lost more easily than ever. It was in this context that executive coaching emerged, a meeting point between psychology and business, between the need for control and the desire for self-understanding. It was no longer advice from superiors, nor psychological therapy. Coaches don't fix anyone. They merely ask questions, listen, and create space for others to self-reflect. The reason for this form's rapid growth lies precisely in the transformations of the world of work. As organizations faced fierce competition, they discovered that business effectiveness depended on leaders' self-awareness. A manager might read hundreds of reports, but if they don't understand what's operating within themselves, they will make decisions blindly. Coaching became a place where leaders paused to reflect, to recognize the gap between action and values, between speed and meaning. The rise of coaching also stemmed from 4 major shifts: looser corporate hierarchies, HR departments beginning to focus on human development rather than just control, the widespread self-help movement inspiring everyone to become a better version of themselves, and finally, competitive pressure making all leaders understand they couldn't stand still in this new world. Coaches were no longer outsiders but companions. Executive coaching served not only individuals but entire organizations. A coaching session didn't end with a thank you, but with systemic change. Leaders gained a better understanding of their employees, learned how to inspire, manage emotions, and connect personal goals with collective missions. At this level, coaching was no longer a private conversation. It became a strategic tool for organizational development. Gradually, the concept of internal coaching emerged as HR departments grew large and sophisticated enough to create specialized roles. Individuals within the organization who served a reflective, non-judgmental function. However, the position of external coaches remained valued for the independence, confidentiality, and unbiased perspective they offered, untouched by company politics. The combination of these two forms enriched the coaching ecosystem. Among dozens of different coaching types, from career coaching and team skills to transformational coaching, executive coaching held a unique position. It touched the deepest layer of leadership capability. It didn't just help people work better, but helped them understand why they work, for whom, and what makes them want to continue. When entering a coaching session, leaders often didn't realize they were about to have a dialogue with themselves, not an easy conversation, but a necessary one. Because in the noisy world of management, there's very little space for stillness. Coaching became the calm between two storms, where leaders learned to listen to their true inner voice. From the perspective of someone who has witnessed hundreds of transformations behind closed doors, I understand that the essence of coaching lies not in questioning techniques or timeframes, but in presence. A good coach doesn't just listen with their ears, but senses with intuition, with the ability to read what remains unsaid in that very space. That's where change begins. This is why coaching is completely different from mentoring or therapy. Mentors guide based on experience, therapists heal based on the past. But coaches awaken the ability for self-change in the present. And when executive coaching is placed in an organizational context, it becomes a bridge between individuals and systems, between personal and collective goals. I still remember a leader's words after their final coaching session. "I'm not sure I've changed the world, but I know from now on, I won't look at the world through old eyes." To me, that statement is the most perfect definition of executive coaching. To understand the essence of leadership coaching, one cannot simply look at the dialogues between two people, but must delve deeper into what operates beneath. Every question, every silence, every change has a hidden theoretical foundation behind it. That is where different approaches converge to form the soul of this profession. These foundations are not opposing, but illuminate each other. Some approaches stem from cognitive behavioral psychology, believing that a change in mindset will lead to a change in action. In this view, the coach is not a healer, but someone who helps clients observe their own belief systems. They ask questions that disrupt inertia. Why do you think that way? What makes you believe that cannot change? From there, the coachee begins to see old patterns, learning to replace reactions with awareness. Others view it through the lens of psychoanalytic psychology, where all behavior bears traces of unresolved conflicts within the coaching space. Sometimes a fleeting remark, an evasive gesture, reveals deep unconscious layers. Coaches listen not only to words, but also to the silences, helping clients realize that sometimes what holds them back isn't strategy or skills, but the fear of judgment, memories of power dynamics, or failure. When these emotional layers are identified, the energy for change begins to flow. Some others opt for transactional analysis (TA). They view each conversation as a game among three ego states within us: child, adult, and parent. When a leader reprimands an employee, it might be the voice of a strict parent rising. When they avoid conflict, it's the fearful child controlling. Coaching helps them return to the adult role, calm, rational, and capable of listening. And when that happens, the system around them also begins to change. But not all coaching seeks analysis. Some schools lean towards existentialism, where the question isn't how, but why. There, coaches don't search for past causes or predict the future. They simply help the individual face their own freedom and responsibility directly. When a leader exclaims, "I don't know what I want anymore," it's not a sign of weakness, but the starting point of growth. For only those who have faced meaninglessness can truly create meaning. Next is the humanistic school, where people are not problems to be solved but potentials to be unlocked. Coaches believe that within every individual, there exists a natural resource for growth. Their task is not to teach but to ignite. They believe in belief. They ask, if you believed you could, what would you do differently? Just one such question can sometimes be enough to awaken the dormant strength within a leader. Another approach is through neurolinguistic programming, NLP, where it's believed that language creates reality. Every word, every image in one's mind carries energy. When a director says, "We are in crisis," their organization will act as if it truly is in crisis. But if they say, "We are in a phase of reshaping," people will see opportunities instead of fear. Coaching, according to NLP, doesn't try to change the speaker, but changes how they use words to create their world. Zen coaching is different. It speaks of full presence. A leader might fully understand strategy, but if their mind is in the past or future, they lose the ability to perceive the present. Zen coaching teaches them to return to the here and now. When coachees are truly present in the moment, they see more clearly the connection between themselves and the team, between intention and action. All change begins the moment we are truly present. Finally, there's the solution-focused approach, orienting towards what's possible rather than what's wrong. Here, the coach doesn't ask, "What is the problem?" but when that is resolved, what will you see differently? This way of questioning pulls people out of the dark analytical zone, guiding them towards action in a busy world. Sometimes, this very simplicity saves hundreds of dialogues when looking at the bigger picture. Looking at the overall landscape, these 8 approaches are like 8 rivers flowing into the same sea. One stream originates from reason, another from emotion, another from presence, but all flow towards one place: a substantive change in human awareness and behavior. That's what makes executive coaching unique. It doesn't choose sides or impose rigid frameworks. Coaches can flexibly use multiple approaches simultaneously, depending on the person they're working with. One moment they are psychologists, another moment storytellers, sometimes they are merely mirrors. It is this blend that creates the power of coaching, possessing both philosophical depth and practical effectiveness. There are coaching sessions where both parties remain silent for a long time. The coachee looks down, the coach sits opposite, waiting, then suddenly the other person looks up and says, "I understand now." No analysis needed, no theory. All 8 schools, all the models, ultimately lead to that very moment. The instant a person realizes something they inherently knew but never dared to confront directly. And it is then that coaching steps into its deepest realm, no longer theory but awakening. In a small room with only 2 people sitting opposite each other, one speaks very little, the other even less. Between them is a heavy silence where long-imprisoned thoughts begin to surface. That is the true space of coaching. There, no one is an expert, no one is a student. There are only 2 individuals together seeking to understand themselves and the world they are creating. In practical implementation, executive coaching becomes a complex and subtle journey. Each organization, each individual has their own context, and therefore no fixed model exists. However, there are foundational structures that help the process operate effectively. First is the choice of coach. Should one use internal personnel or hire externally? Insiders understand the culture, language, and pressures, but they are limited by the very power structure. External hires, however, have the advantage of neutrality. Sometimes, just an outside perspective is enough to change how a leader perceives themselves. After roles are established, the next stage is the tripartite contract signing between the coach, the coachee, and the sponsoring organization. This is not just an administrative agreement but a commitment to boundaries. What is said in the room will be kept confidential unless the participant explicitly agrees to share it. This confidentiality is the soul of coaching. Without it, there is no trust. Without trust, there is no truth. In each session, the coach and the leader go through a series of stages: setting objectives, exploring the current reality, identifying obstacles, and finally taking action. One of the most common methodological frameworks for this journey is the GROW model, an acronym for goal, reality, options, and will. First, establish a clear goal. Next, observe the reality as it is. Then, broaden the options available. And finally, commit to action, will. GROW is not a formula, but a compass that helps keep the conversation on track. Parallel to GROW, coaches also apply experiential learning, where leaders learn through their own actions and reflections. They experiment, make mistakes, adjust, and then return to self-observation. This cycle makes change sustainable. Additionally, competency models help identify the core qualities to develop to achieve goals. But no matter how modern the tools, the value of coaching still lies in the human relationship. A chart cannot build trust. Only a sincere gaze can do that. Some organizations apply positive psychology in coaching, emphasizing identifying strengths rather than fixing weaknesses. They believe people develop fastest when built upon what they do best. When coaches encourage clients to talk about times they shone, the atmosphere immediately shifts. From there, conversations that were once heavy become a nurturing flow of energy. Other coaches choose contextual frame theory, emphasizing the role of context and how people structure their actions. According to this theory, every decision a leader makes is linked to an action framework, a set of beliefs and expectations they carry. Coaching helps them realize that sometimes actions don't need to change, only the perspective needs to shift. When the framework changes, actions self-correct. In practice, the duration and frequency of coaching sessions are also flexibly designed. Some need 6 months, others just 3 sessions, some programs run weekly, others monthly. What's important is not the number of hours, but the quality of presence. A truly focused moment can be worth more than dozens of hours of aimless conversation. Interestingly, coaching doesn't always progress in a straight line. There are sessions that seem like failures. The coachee remains silent, evasive, or even angry. But these very moments are signals that change is approaching. Resistance isn't the enemy, it's a doorway. When coaches are patient enough, they will see behind that door the fear of judgment, the loneliness of leadership. And when that is understood, leaders begin to open up. From an organizational perspective, coaching is most effective when viewed as part of a leadership development strategy, rather than a quick fix for problematic individuals. Many large global companies have created internal coaching ecosystems, where every manager is trained in listening, giving feedback, and asking questions instead of issuing commands. When this culture spreads, businesses not only have better leaders, but also employees who are self-directed. But there are also clear limitations. Coaching cannot replace decision-making, nor is it a magical cure. It is effective only when participants are ready to take responsibility for their actions. A coaching session is not meant to make someone feel better, but to help them see the truth more clearly, both the pleasant and the unpleasant. After many years witnessing hundreds of such journeys, I realized that coaching is not a technique but an art of transformation. It's not measured by dashboards but by small yet profound changes. How a leader pauses before reacting, how they ask one more question instead of concluding, how they learn to say, "I don't know," without feeling weak. In the increasingly complex world of management, sometimes strength lies not in knowing more, but in understanding deeper. Coaching teaches us that leadership begins with the ability to lead oneself. And when that happens, organizations also begin to change. Because ultimately, the purpose of coaching is not to create perfect people, but authentic individuals who know clearly where they are going, why, and are ready to take responsibility for that path. A question has haunted me throughout my years in the profession. How can one measure human change? When a leader learns to listen, when they begin to understand others instead of just giving orders, can we quantify that, or must it be perceived intuitively? This seemingly philosophical question became central to an entire field: the journey to find evidence for the effectiveness of leadership coaching. When reviewing hundreds of research studies, we noticed one clear thing: there's no consensus on how to define coaching success. Some measure it by revenue increase, some use self-assessment scales, others record it through peer feedback. The problem lies in the nature of human change itself. It's slow, nonlinear, and sometimes not immediately visible. Lask once said that behavior only changes when people shift their developmental level, and these transformations occur in stages, not quantifiable by mere data. Nevertheless, academia continues to seek ways to prove the impact of coaching. Studies are divided into 2 directions. The first is asterisk research within coaching, focusing on the relationship, emotions, and developmental stages of the coachee. The second is research on coaching, using quantitative data, combining sociological and market analysis to build a foundation of evidence. Increasingly, these 2 directions merge, forming mixed methods research combining qualitative and quantitative data, as seen in the works of Griff, B., Lin, and Grant. From our synthesis, we found 27 studies using mixed methods, 11 purely quantitative studies, and only 5 qualitative studies. Despite different approaches, the general conclusion converged. Coaching has a clear impact on performance, self-awareness, and leadership capabilities. However, these results always come with a caveat. Measuring coaching effectiveness is an extremely difficult task, not due to a lack of tools, but because the nature of the process is internal and experiential rather than merely demonstrable. To address this, researchers began relying on competency and personality assessment tools, from tests like MBTI and the Big Five to scales measuring emotional intelligence or decision-making ability. All were used before and after the coaching process to determine the extent of change. An interesting finding was that the most sustainable changes often occurred not in skills, but in awareness the way leaders viewed themselves and others. However, quantitative evidence only reflects the tip of the iceberg. We found more subtle changes in qualitative studies, improvements in decision-making, relationship-building skills, and especially a transformation in ethical awareness. Someone who once only cared about profit began talking about vision. Someone who used to avoid conflict learned how to confront it. These things cannot be measured by a scale, but are the soul of coaching. To test effectiveness, scientists compared coaching with other leadership development methods, such as mentoring, focus training, or psychological therapy. Results showed that coaching surpassed them in its ability to sustain long-term impact because it creates change from within. Mentoring offers advice, training provides skills, therapy helps heal. But only coaching awakens the sense of self-responsibility, the decisive factor for a mature leader. Throughout the entire analysis process, we realized that a true criterion for coaching success lies not in measurable outcomes, but in the depth of the coachee's self-awareness. A program can be considered successful when leaders themselves ask the right questions. Instead of waiting for answers, they not only achieve initial goals, but also expand their ability to perceive problems. A prime example is the research by Grant and Cunney. After 6 months of coaching, leaders in the experimental group not only improved their leadership competency scores, but also changed how they dealt with mistakes. They reduced their tendency to blame, increased their capacity for self-reflection and collaboration. These results, though subtle, demonstrated that leadership development is not just superficial behavior, but a deep cognitive process. However, when it comes to evidence, we cannot overlook limitations. Many studies have been criticized for small sample sizes, short durations, or lack of objectivity. Numerous studies rely on participants' subjective evaluations, leading to a risk of bias. This is the paradox of science in the human domain. The more we try to quantify, the more we risk losing the most important aspect: humanity. Instead of avoiding this, researchers are seeking reconciliation. New studies are beginning to use mixed models where quantitative data serves only to support deeper qualitative understanding. Competency metrics are seen as maps, while the coachee's story is the actual terrain. When these two layers of data intersect, a complete picture finally emerges. Perhaps what's important is not proving how effective coaching is, but understanding why it's effective. The power of coaching lies not in its tools or processes, but in the encounter between two people in a space of absolute trust. There, the coachee dares to be honest, dares to be vulnerable, and this very authenticity becomes the starting point for all change. And perhaps that is also the greatest lesson learned from the entire research process. Science can confirm that something exists, but only human experience makes it meaningful. Coaching cannot be confined to numbers because it touches the deepest aspect of the leadership essence: the ability to transform oneself into the person one desires to be. The world of coaching is not just warm dialogues or dazzling results charts. It's a stage full of debate where values, methods, and professional power collide. As this industry develops at a dizzying pace, the inevitable question arises: who has the right to define coaching, and who is qualified to call themselves a coach? These debates are not new. From the late 1990s, when coaching began to spread in the business world, people questioned whether it was any different from psychotherapy or merely a rebranding to attract the entrepreneurial market. Some psychologists argued that coaching was just a modern therapy, shortening the healing process and overlaying it with a veneer of success. But practitioners countered that coaching doesn't heal the past, but stimulates action in the present. It doesn't dissect causes, but helps people focus on goals. Nevertheless, the boundaries between fields are always blurry. Many researchers point out that in practice, some coaching sessions delve deep into emotions and the unconscious, indistinguishable from therapy. A leader, when speaking of the fear of failure or the loneliness at the top, sometimes needs not advice but understanding. It is at this intersection, between therapy and development, that coaching is both praised as an art and criticized for lacking scientific rigor. This led to a larger debate about professional standards. Who has the authority to set standards for the entire industry? Many argue that organizations like the International Coach Federation, ICF, should play a coordinating role because they focus on ethics and professional practice. Others believe that the American Psychological Association, or psychological professional bodies, with their stronger academic foundations, are better suited to ensure quality. But ultimately, the nature of coaching doesn't belong exclusively to psychology, nor is it merely business training. It lies between two worlds, being both scientific and humanistic. The debate also extended to another question: who is responsible for the outcome of coaching? Some argued that the organization funding it should guarantee that organizational goals are met. But there was strong opposition to this view, stating that the coach's role is not to force results, but to help leaders take responsibility for themselves. If the coach becomes an indirect manager, the coaching process loses the integrity that is its soul. Some extreme opinions once called coaching an expensive accessory for managers, a luxury item for those who enjoyed being encouraged. Yet market data completely refutes this. Even during financial crises, the coaching industry didn't weaken. On the contrary, it grew stronger, expanding into education, healthcare, and the public sector. Coaching is not a trend. It meets a genuine need for awareness in an age of speed. Nevertheless, the risks of coaching becoming an industry cannot be denied. When anyone can call themselves a coach, quality becomes difficult to control. Fast-track training courses spring up, promising international certification in a few weeks. Some companies hire coaches merely to legitimize HR processes, turning coaching into a bureaucratic tool. This has led many industry experts to call for strict standardization and professional ethics. However, standardization also has a downside. When everything is bound by frameworks, coaching risks losing its creativity. Truly profound conversations often happen outside the box, where coaches flexibly navigate between methods, from cognitive behavioral to humanistic, from psychoanalytic to existential. It is this blend of methods that gives life to the profession. A good coach isn't absolutely loyal to one school of thought, but knows which technique to use at what time, depending on the person sitting opposite them. As I observe this entire picture, what makes me both hopeful and concerned is the industry's pace of development. Coaching is entering a strong professionalization phase, but the further it goes, the easier it is to forget its roots. It was born from the desire to help people become better versions of themselves, not from market demand. Whenever this industry is pulled towards commercialism, we must ask ourselves, are we coaching for human development or merely for increased efficiency? The future of coaching, I believe, lies not in establishing a global standard system, but in its ability to maintain a reflective spirit. It needs both discipline and freedom, both evidence and faith. Because coaching is a strange profession, the more standardized it becomes, the more it needs the human element to survive. And it is this very paradox that keeps it captivating, continually evolving as an endless dialogue between knowledge and instinct, between science and soul. I have always believed that to understand the essence of coaching, one must first understand what humanity calls leadership, because coaching doesn't stand alone. It is a mirror reflecting the entire evolution of leadership, thinking from the days when people believed power lay in bloodlines to the era where power resides in awareness. The concept of leadership is thus not fixed. It transforms with each wave of human culture, economy, and psychology. The world once began with a simple view. Leadership was about innate qualities, and trait theory emerged in that context. Viewing leadership ability as a gift from creation, people believed that someone born with a strong spirit, sharp intellect, and an iron will would inevitably become a leader. But history proved otherwise. Many great leaders started as ordinary individuals, and some born into glory crumbled because they failed to understand people. From there, behavioral theory emerged, suggesting that leadership is the result of learning and training. People began studying how leaders behave, communicate, and inspire. As organizations grew more complex, a new perspective arose: situational theory. No longer was there one leadership style suitable for all times, but only leaders who knew how to adapt. In one circumstance, they might be firm, in another, flexible. Strength lay in the ability to recognize the situation and adjust one's style accordingly. Coaching, in this regard, became a tool to help leaders read their own internal context. For anyone wanting to adapt to the world must start by understanding their own moods, values, and limitations. By the late 20th century, as society reached a crisis of trust, people realized that efficiency alone was no longer sufficient. Transformational leadership theory emerged, emphasizing the roles of vision, inspiration, and ethics. A leader was not just someone who achieved results, but someone who made others better. This is the deepest intersection between leadership and coaching. Both are based on the principle that change cannot be forced, it can only be inspired. A transformational leader is someone who knows how to coach their team, igniting their hidden potential instead of controlling them. In parallel, another movement appeared: authentic leadership. It championed sincerity, transparency, and the courage to live true to one's values. An authentic leader doesn't try to appear perfect. They admit mistakes, listen to feedback, and dare to show vulnerability when needed in coaching. This is a core competency because coaching is only effective when the coachee dares to drop their mask, and the coach is courageous enough not to hide behind the role of an expert. Both learn together, change together, and become more authentic. When analyzing the connection between coaching and these theories, I noticed a pattern. Each step forward in leadership thinking opened a new, deeper layer for coaching. From behavioral coaching, which helps change skills, to cognitive coaching, which helps change thinking, then to transformational coaching, which helps change one's very being. This parallel development makes coaching not just a training tool, but an evolutionary method for modern leadership. In traditional leadership development models, the focus is always on results, achieving goals, optimizing performance, expanding power. But coaching goes against the current. It asks, who are you when you no longer hold this position? What do you want to leave behind when you no longer control others? These very questions pull leaders out of their performance orbit, guiding them to the deep region of the self. There, they learn to lead with meaning, not just with power. A leader, after many months of coaching, once told me, "I thought coaching would help me work more efficiently, but it turned out it made me understand that I used to use work to escape myself." That statement encapsulates the spirit of coaching in the leadership world. It doesn't teach how to win, but how to be awake amidst the race. Looking at the entire picture, coaching can be seen as the natural continuation of all leadership theories. It is personal like trait theory, practical like behavioral theory, flexible like situational theory, inspiring like transformational leadership, and authentic like authentic leadership. All converge in coaching, where leaders learn to lead themselves. But coaching is not just where theories converge, it's also where they are tested. In each session, we clearly see the clash between old and new ways of thinking, between models of control and freedom. A leader might know theories of vision by heart, but only when confronted with subordinates' resistance do they truly know what they believe. It is in that moment that coaching becomes the most honest mirror reflecting leadership. I believe that the future of leadership will no longer be separate from coaching as organizations gradually shift from management to empowerment, from rigid structures to continuous learning. Coaching will be the new language of leadership, a language not based on commands, but on questions, not seeking control, but helping people realize their own power. If in the past, leadership was defined by the ability to command, in this era it is defined by the ability to listen. Coaching, in its most natural way, is the practice for this skill. It transforms leadership from the art of influence to the art of presence, where power no longer lies in words, but in knowing silence. And perhaps that is the true destination of both Journey's leadership and coaching, not to create people stronger than others, but to create individuals stronger than their past selves. In the world of management, people often speak of strategy, vision, and organizational structure as pillars of success. But the true soul of leadership lies in something less visible, developing leadership as a collective capability, not just honing a few outstanding individuals. At that deep level, change doesn't come from one better decision-maker, but from an entire system that knows how to collaborate, understand, and self-reflect. When we began researching leadership development, the first thing we realized was that the world was confusing two concepts: developing a leader and developing leadership. The first refers to an individual's capabilities, the latter to the capacity of an entire community. People often invest in training individuals, sending them to courses, inviting experts to coach them, but forget that leadership only truly matters when it's distributed across the organization's network of relationships. An excellent individual in an isolated environment can become ineffective when placed in a complex interactive system. Ironically, the more leadership development programs there are, the more true leadership seems to be lacking. Early 21st century studies showed that most leadership development programs fail not due to a lack of knowledge, but a lack of ability to transform knowledge. People knew more but didn't act differently. They learned new skills but still reacted with old habits. And in this paradox, executive coaching emerged as a countercurrent form of education, not transmitting information, but unlocking potential. Executive coaching served as a solution to the complexity of leadership development because it doesn't add information to the mind, but opens a space for individuals to self-reflect. When leaders learn to see themselves, their limitations, beliefs, fears, they begin to see others. This change spreads from individual awareness to organizational culture, gradually forming collective consciousness. It is here that coaching becomes a catalyst for a new kind of leadership. Leadership based on mindfulness, the ability to be fully present and consciously respond to reality. But to reach that level, it's crucial to understand that leadership development is one of the most complex human processes. It encompasses not just skills, but also the interplay between leader, follower, context, time, technology, history, and even luck. Every changing factor brings unpredictable shifts. Therefore, no two development journeys are alike, and no standard model can be applied universally. Many researchers have asked, among the hundreds of leadership development programs implemented each year, what truly endures? The answer is thought-provoking. Only what touches the essence of being human remains. A lecture on strategy might be forgotten, but a conversation that makes someone realize how they are treating others that can change them forever. That is why coaching, by its nature a deep dialogue between two people, becomes the place where lessons truly take root. When coaching is introduced into organizations, it begins to bridge the gap between academia and practice. Management models once taught in classrooms are now tested directly in the workplace. In the light of real emotions, leaders no longer learn how to lead others, but how to understand themselves in relation to others. From there, theory is no longer confined to paper, but becomes living experience. In this journey, the role of mindfulness becomes central. Leaders cannot just react quickly, they must react consciously. When a leader is truly present, it means they don't let the past or anxieties about the future dominate. They create space for those around them to also become more self-aware at a collective level, forming a mindful organization and entity that pays attention to its people, context, and the consequences of its actions. The spread of mindfulness doesn't happen randomly. Research shows that senior leaders maintain strategic mindfulness, middle managers act as a bridge, and frontline employees transform it into concrete behavior. If businesses only invest in coaching for the top tier while neglecting the middle, they miss the most crucial link, where awareness is translated into action. Therefore, distributing coaching investments in a balanced way is not just a matter of fairness, but a survival strategy. Executive coaching doesn't replace training programs, but complements their missing parts. If traditional management education teaches people how to analyze, coaching teaches them how to listen. If traditional classrooms produce explicit knowledge concepts, models, formulas, coaching nurtures implicit knowledge, self-confidence, perceptive ability, leadership intuition. When these two types of knowledge combine, they create a comprehensive form of understanding, knowing both what to do and why. In a constantly changing world, What can be taught by textbooks will soon become obsolete. What remains is the ability for continuous learning, ceaseless reflection, and an open mindset towards change. Coaching is precisely the tool that nurtures this learning capacity, a capacity that all future leaders need to possess. It helps them look back at their journey, recognize patterns of action, and then adjust to fit new contexts. And when every individual in an organization learns that, the organization becomes a learning ecosystem, where change is no longer a threat but an opportunity for growth. In this profound sense, executive coaching is not a method for improving performance, but a way to make the organization conscious. It helps leaders understand that success comes not from knowing more than others, but from understanding themselves better in relation to them. And once that awareness spreads, leadership capability no longer belongs to individuals, but becomes a collective asset, the only asset that cannot be replicated. Looking back at the history of management education, I noticed something peculiar. Most programs considered world-class stop at knowledge transmission. They teach how to plan, analyze data, and make decisions. But they rarely teach people how to self-observe during that process. And it is in that gap that executive coaching compensates for the shortcomings of traditional training. Management education provides explicit knowledge models, formulas, processes that can be read, noted, and evaluated. Coaching, meanwhile, nurtures implicit knowledge-deep understandings within individuals that cannot be articulated but govern every action. A leader might know negotiation theories by heart, but only when they understand their own fear of losing control can they truly negotiate. Coaching opens up space for that, a form of learning not through books, but through experience. In business schools, students are trained in analytical thinking and decision-making skills, but they rarely learn about presence. Thus, when they enter real-world environments where emotions, power, and conflict intertwine, they carry a void that only personal experience can fill. Executive coaching is precisely the bridge between knowledge and experience, between understanding and action. Imagine two parallel streams of knowledge. One is academic knowledge, clear, structured, measurable. The other is experiential knowledge, intuitive, flexible, and elusive. When these two streams meet, they create a new flow where learners not only know what to do, but also understand why they do it. And it is at that intersection that leadership matures. But executive coaching doesn't just help individuals learn better. It also transforms how organizations learn. A leader who knows how to self-reflect will influence the entire team. They begin asking questions instead of judging, encouraging curiosity instead of obedience. That change gradually spreads from one department to another, forming a learning culture where knowledge not only flows top-down, but also laterally and bottom-up. In this context, the concept of mindfulness in individuals and organizations becomes vibrant. Individual mindfulness is the ability to pay attention to the present, recognizing thoughts without being controlled by them. Organizational mindfulness, meanwhile, is the collective ability to be aware. When a company knows how to observe itself, recognizing its decision-making, reactions, and learning processes, at this level, coaching is no longer an individual tool, but an organizational capability. Interestingly, research indicates that senior leaders often maintain strategic mindfulness, seeing the big picture but sometimes being detached from reality. Middle managers, however, are the bridge that brings mindfulness into daily life. They coordinate actions, resolve conflicts, and ensure operational rhythms don't lose their human touch. It is precisely this group that can translate the philosophy of mindfulness into concrete behaviors: how to listen, how to give feedback, how to lead in a crisis. If coaching is only invested in the highest leadership tier, the organization will resemble a tree with lush green leaves, but a trunk prone to drying out. The most sustainable changes always start from the middle tier, where people have both the power to execute and are close enough to feel the organization's heartbeat. Executive coaching helps them be both stronger in decisions and more adaptable in interactions. And it is this combination that creates stability for the entire system. Furthermore, executive coaching addresses the low transfer of training, a problem that traditional education has yet to overcome. What is learned in the classroom often dies out in practice. Coaching, thanks to its direct connection to the work context, helps learners immediately transform what they are experiencing. Each coaching session is a living laboratory where theory and practice meet in real time. At a broader level, coaching also helps business schools bridge the gap between research and practice. For many years, academia was criticized for being detached from reality, while businesses lack the ability for theoretical reflection. When coaching is integrated into training programs, students not only read research but also experience what that research refers to. They are no longer just listeners but witnesses. From that perspective, executive coaching is a dialogue between two worlds, the knowledge of reason and the knowledge of experience. One provides structure, the other brings life. When they blend, knowledge is no longer something transmitted, but something discovered together. The important thing is that coaching doesn't just teach people to know, but teaches them to be aware *, not understanding in a logical sense, but deep perception. A leader who knows how to analyze the market is good, but a leader who knows how to recognize their own emotions in failure, that is the one who can lead through volatility. Therefore, executive coaching and management education are not two parallel paths, but two halves of a circle. One half helps people understand the world, the other helps them understand themselves within that world. When the circle closes, knowledge becomes wisdom, and leadership becomes authentic humanity. Looking back at the entire development journey of executive coaching, I realized that the most important factor is not the method but the context. It is the context that determines whether coaching will succeed or fail, whether it will be true transformation or merely a luxurious ritual for managers. Therefore, instead of asking, "Is coaching effective?" the right question should be, "In what context is coaching effective? With whom and how?" If we envision the coaching process as a map, it has three core elements: the organization, the coach, and the coachee. Each element is its own world, carrying different expectations, cultures, and goals. When these three worlds intersect, they form an overlapping zone where change can either emerge or be stifled. A coaching program, no matter how perfect, can falter if any of the three parties are not aligned. The context of intervention map is therefore not an abstract theory but a vital tool. It allows us to read the underlying currents at play: the trust between parties, the organizational power structure, and the cultural atmosphere in which the coachee lives. An open organization that encourages feedback will nurture coaching like fertile ground for seeds to sprout. Conversely, an environment filled with fear will make all efforts merely superficial. When surveying dozens of global companies, we found that the decisive success factors lay not in the coach's fame or investment cost, but in three things: trust, fit, and adaptability to context. Trust is foundational. If the coachee doesn't believe in the process, they will merely play a role. Fit is demonstrated by matching the right person with the right guide. A good coach isn't necessarily suitable for every client. Resonance in values, language, and style is more important than any certification. Adaptability, finally, is the ability to read situations, understanding when to challenge, when to remain silent, when to push, and when to pull back. But there's a less discussed factor: the organization's role as an agent of the coaching process. Coaching will fail if the organization treats it as an outsourced service rather than an integral part of its leadership development strategy. Successful companies understand that after each individual coaching session, they need to create an environment for coachees to practice, reflect, and spread new awareness. At that point, coaching is no longer an individual experience, but becomes collective learning. This leads to a big question: who will lead the future of coaching? I believe four forces are shaping the path ahead: professional coaches, businesses, business schools, and the field of psychology. Each holds a part of the key. Coaches possess the practical expertise and the art of human interaction. Businesses provide the real-world context, business schools offer knowledge and research, and psychology ensures the scientific foundation. When these four parties collaborate, coaching will become a bridge between science and life, between theory and behavior. However, there are still many gaps to fill. Most current research focuses only on individual outcomes, satisfaction levels, behavioral changes, or productivity. We still don't fully understand how coaching impacts systems, teams, culture, and power structures. These ripple effects need to be studied more deeply. Furthermore, most current data originates from the West, whereas organizational cultures in other countries can elicit entirely different responses. Therefore, future research must center on context. Coaching cannot be understood in isolation from the environment in which it takes place. A program successful in London might be meaningless in Tokyo, and an effective questioning technique in a US tech company could be counterproductive in an East Asian organization where hierarchy remains strong. Context is not a backdrop, it is the main content. Additionally, more research is needed on post-coaching. What happens after the program ends? Are the changes sustained, or are they drawn back into the organization's old routines? This requires a combination of long-term studies and deep qualitative analysis, where individuals are not just measured but listened to. Another direction is to measure systemic impact, not just individual impact. When coaching succeeds, it not only changes the leader but also makes their team more open, collaborative, and innovative. But to prove this, new measurement models must be developed flexible, interdisciplinary, and respectful of human complexity. I also believe that in the near future, technology will become an indispensable partner. AI can support the analysis of voice, emotions, and interactions during coaching, helping to identify patterns that humans might find hard to recognize. But technology should only play a supporting role, never a replacement. Because the essence of coaching is the presence between two human beings, an encounter that data cannot replicate. And finally, perhaps the most important thing future research needs to remember: coaching is not a field seeking certainty, but a journey of accepting human uncertainty. Research on humans is always research into what cannot be fully quantified. We can count hours and goals achieved, but we cannot count the moment a person realizes themselves or the instant they dare to change. Executive coaching will therefore continue to evolve, not towards more control, but towards deeper understanding. Its future lies not in models, but in the courage of individuals to look within themselves. And as long as there are people who wish to understand more deeply how they lead, coaching will remain the most honest mirror reflecting the development of human leadership. There's a peculiar truth in the modern world. The more power people wield, the lonelier they become. The better they are at making decisions, the fewer people truly dare to speak truth to them. And it is in that void that executive coaching emerges, not to teach more, but to strip away the camouflage of overconfidence, to strip away the illusion that leaders must know everything, and to leave behind what remains: a human being trying to understand themselves amidst the labyrinth of roles and expectations. The greatest lesson of this book lies not in how many models or methods one learns, but in beginning to understand why true change is so rare. Because change doesn't come from adding information, but from daring to confront the part of ourselves we most often avoid. A leader truly develops only when they realize that leading others is the natural consequence of knowing how to lead themselves. The book shows us that all leadership theories will eventually become outdated. What remains is the capacity for self-observation, the ability to pause amidst chaos and ask, "Why am I doing this?" That is a question no one else can answer for you. Coaching, in its deepest sense, is not a conversation with another person, but the first honest conversation between you and yourself. And perhaps what the book wants to convey is also what anyone who has lived long enough in the world of leadership understands. Power doesn't make people stronger. It merely amplifies what they already possess. If fear resides within, power transforms that fear into control. If trust resides within, power transforms that trust into influence. Coaching doesn't change this fundamental nature, but it illuminates it, giving people the opportunity to choose who they want to be again. Now, try asking yourself, on your journey, where are you trying to lead others when you yourself don't truly know where you want to go? How many of your decisions stem from understanding, and how many from mere reflexes? Are you living as an awakened leader, or merely repeating the patterns of those before you whom you once criticized? Perhaps the most important thing is not what position you hold, but whether you still have the courage to listen to yourself when everyone else falls silent. If you're seeking to become a better leader, start not by learning more, but by sitting down and looking at what you have avoided. Find a coach not for them to tell you what to do, but for them to ask you the questions you dare not ask yourself. And if there is no one, let this very book be your companion. Because ultimately, every leadership journey leads to the same place: the moment you clearly see yourself, and from there, the world begins to change.